Welcome to the channel. Today we'll be discussing current events. And if you're one of those people who have been thinking about a looming world war and a looming war in the Middle East, as most of us have over the past couple of weeks, we're going to find out in this episode that paganism, as usual, has the answer to that. Let me explain what I mean. First of all, there's a war going on in the Middle East, and it's in our faces and on our screens, on our television and on our social media 24/7. And the Middle East has this special effect where it can just kind of suck people in. And in part that's because the media does its job, and it sends pictures of like kids with blood and crying parents on your screens, and they trigger you. They aim at your heart, and they're very successful at that. And you also get the impression that you kind of need to pick a side. You're either this or you're that, and then you have to like debate with people online or call them names online. It's not even debating. Well, that's just not productive at all. That's not productive for two reasons. One reason is we have very little to no control of what's going on in the Middle East. Well, let me rephrase that. We actually have no control. So we're giving away our energy and we're getting nothing in return. And it's actually bad for us because what we connect with is war, it's misery, it's cruelty, it's dead civilians and dead children. And if you spend all your energy you spend in that, you can't spend it on something else, and it deteriorates your charisma and your energy. That's one reason why it's not good and not productive. You get sucked into this war. Other reason, I don't think it's very pagan to get sucked into this war. I think it's more, the Abrahamic religions like the Christians and the Muslims and the Jews. They are all somehow very, very tied to this Middle East thing. Everybody has their holy land there, so you have the Crusades and the Jihad, and it all comes together. I think a big part of being a pagan is setting your own 2 feet on the ground of your own motherland and really falling in love with the land and the spirits of the land that you were born. Meaning that, if necessary, I'll fight for this land, not per se this government, but this land. But I'm sure as hell not going to fight for a land on the other side of Europe, on the other side of the continent, somewhere in the Middle East. That's more of a Christian, Muslim, Jewish thing to do. That's not a pagan thing to do. Now, like I said, the Middle East has this quality that it can suck people in. And it also sucked me in, kind of. Like, I also found myself in the messages debating with somebody about this conflict. And after a couple of messages, I was like, why am I doing this? Like I said, it's not helping me, it's not helping the Middle East, it's just energy that's gone. And I follow Thomas Sheridan, as some of you know, and those who don't know, you should probably follow Thomas Sheridan. He's a very interesting figure. And I'm on his newsletter. And he had this advice. He says, if you feel yourself just getting sucked into this Middle East thing, you should just take a very long walk into the woods. If you take a long walk into the woods, that stuff will just slide right off you. Now that's good advice, because nature can kind of balance things out for us. I started thinking why it is that specifically in this situation, that helps so much. Because I took his advice and this whole malarkey of this whole injustice on both sides, it slid right off me. Have you ever seen a duck go underwater and then they go above water? What happens is the water that was on top of the duck, it doesn't make the duck wet because he put some sort of grease into his feathers. Fat. So the water slides off him. That's what happened to us when we go deep in nature and deep into the forest. That's what happened to our troubles. They slide off us like water off a freshly greased duck. I hope that analogy makes somewhat sense. But why is it, specifically in this case, that it's so good? What do we find in the forest? Well, we find in the forest our fertility gods, our horn gods, specifically the god Pan. Now, if you don't know the god Pan, he is from the Greek pantheon. The story is that his mother gave birth to him, and she was so in shock by his appearance, because he was basically half a goat. He had the feet of a goat, and he had the horns coming out of his face. So she was so afraid that she just left him and she ran. But somebody found him, and he brought him to Mount Olympus, to the other gods. And all the other gods loved him. He's the god of the wild. He's the god of shepherds. He's the god of travel. He's energetic. He's playful. And the story has it that somewhere around the 2nd century in Greece, someone heard a voice in the forest saying, "Pan is dead! Pan is dead!" So they didn't know who said it, but they carried on that message. And the belief was that once nature was very wild, but as civilization grew and grew, more cities, and all those cities needed food, so you have agriculture, there's much less of the wild. So there's much less of Pan. So it is believed to a lot of people that Pan died. Well, he wasn't actually dead, he was asleep. And when I was walking the forest here in the east of Holland, very close to the German border, I had a feeling that Pan is coming back. Now let me try and explain what I mean by that. In part, that's because Pan basically has 4 stages, and there was a famous painter, which name I forgot, who made 4 paintings of the god Pan, and the first painting is just all wilderness, so that's all Pan. The second painting is there are some villages there, and the people live in harmony with the wild. And the third, there are only cities, and Pan is forgotten. The fourth is the cities crumble, and Pan takes over once again. Well, if you look at it like that, it's very easy to determine where Europe and Western civilization are at this moment. They're at basically the third painting. Cities are everywhere and the old gods are forgotten. So Pan is asleep or away. And I have this feeling that we're very close to the 4th stage, to Pan returning again. And that also means becoming a bit more wild like ourselves, because we like to think we're very different from nature. We like to think we're better with our smartphones and our internet and our cars and everything. But mankind is like the nature around him, which means Dutch people, European people, Western civilization people are often very civilized people, because that's what our nature is. Our nature is the pastures that graze our cows, that feed us. It's a civilized nature, so it's a civilized people. And as Pan returns and nature becomes more wild, we shall also become more wild. That's nothing to be afraid of, because if we become more wild, that means we also, in part, become more free. And if you view life and the world according to these 4 paintings and these 4 cycles, because even the seasons, there's not just in nature, the seasons are in us and in our civilizations as well. You're no longer that afraid of the Third World War. You realize that there's a time for a sunrise, and you realize there's a time for a sunset. So there may come a time where you will hear gunshots in the streets and bombs in the cities of Europe and the screaming of people. You might hear that, but I won't. Because all that I will hear is the return of the god Pan. All that I will hear is Pan using his pan flute to create panic or pandemonium, and thus making way for nature to take a bigger place among us once again. That's my message I have for you. So don't stress about it. Focus on yourself and the things you can actually change. That's where your power is. Don't give your power away to the wars of the sand demons. That's not where your power lies. Your power lies in the forest. And if you listen, you can find the strength there. And you can find a part of yourself there again that you're better adapted to the world that is coming. That's it. I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. If you like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. I always hate saying that because I kind of feel like a prostitute, but it helps the channel out a lot. So, see you next week. Ga met de goden.